Hello, my friends. I'm recording the audio for the interview with my friend from Prague, from Czech Republic. And this will be the interview about the Europeans and the European values and how we really, the Czech and Ukrainian, estimate those values by ourselves.
So, Alex, first of all, thank you for taking your time from your busy schedule that you have joined us. And please, the floor is yours. And, let us hear something about you.
Well, thank you, Matěj, for inviting me. That's like my pleasure, of course. I really like your podcast, and your format is very very interesting. First of all, because I went through the couple of episodes, and I was really interested in how the Europeans perceive themselves and what they think about Europe, living within Europe. And the European mentality and European values is, I think, the common thing for discussion for all of us. And that's why, even being Ukrainian, of course, I'm involved very much into the European discourse about what's next and what is Europe for all of us. Well, I'm also, as you said, I'm the anchor of the Ukrainian Unleashed podcast, and I try to reveal Ukraine and discover Ukraine for the whole world, for the foreigners, first of all, for the international community, because a lot of them, they just don't know what is going on inside of Ukraine, except politics probably. But I'm actually interested not only in politics, but in common topics about the different things like music, cinema, the animal rights protection, the level of journalism in Ukraine, the media, what's going on in business, what's going on in the IT industry, and a lot of stuff like that, which are not discovered by the international community outside of Ukraine. So that's why my purpose is to give as much information as I can in English about Ukraine. Well, I'm also, very briefly, I'm a journalist working in the regional media in Odessa. This is an online media, informer.ua, and also I'm a member of the Institute of Political Information, which is the Ukrainian NGO, basically working in the south of Ukraine, in Odessa region, Mykolaiv region, Kherson region. So this is the southern part of Ukraine.
So thank you, Alex, for giving us the opportunity to hear something about you. And it's, I would say, in my opinion, it's very interesting, but at the same time, very honorable, so to say, what you're doing for your country, Ukraine, trying to introduce your country from different perspective than just from the politics, which is, as you said, something that everybody hears about just because of the situation between Russia and Ukraine, and also the parts of your country such as Luhansk, Donetsk, and so on. So my first question would be for you, as this is a common Europeans podcast, and we are trying to find the answer for the commonalities that we might observe and have between us or among us. I would like to first of all ask you, Alex, how many countries in Europe have you visited so far?
Well, actually, that's a very nice question, because some people, they really know few countries in Europe probably, and for them, the Europe is mostly a picture that they see on the internet and on TV or I don't know where. Well, I was blessed actually to visit a lot of countries in Europe. Well, if I count it, that's probably like 17 or 19 countries in Europe only. Because once I counted them all, where I really traveled during my whole life, and I've been to 23 countries, and 18 of them are European. Well, it just happened because part of my life I really spent in Europe during my studies. And also, these are the opportunities that I caught in the university, thanks to the European exchange programs like Erasmus and other programs and the conferences I attended to as well. So basically, I've been to different parts of Europe, probably except Scandinavian countries. That's a pity. But well, no, sorry, I wasn't Finland. I wasn't Finland just like a tourist, just as a tourist. So. I've never been to the UK because we, as Ukrainians, we still need to obtain a special visa for visiting the UK. Well, in terms of the European countries, you know that from 2016, Ukrainians obtained the visa-free regime for visiting the European Union countries during the 3 months. So we can go there using our biometrical passports. And that made life much easier for Ukrainians, and a lot of Ukrainians finally visited a lot of different countries and discovered Europe as tourists. Some of them, they also like started their studies there. After that, my experience with European countries actually was all that happened to me about Europe. That was before 2016, even before I got the visa-free liberalization regime. So I obtained the visas, but still went to Europe. Spent 2 years of my life in France for my studies, 6 months in Lithuania, 3 months in Romania, and like other countries I just visited as a tourist. So and that's all the time. That's impressive. And I still have lots of places and countries that I've never been to, and I really would love to go like to all of them at least.
The Erasmus is actually aiming for creating something that we might call a European identity. However, and I think you already answered this question, but let's elaborate on that a bit. And that is the question about which country is your favorite one here in Europe, and what makes you so attracted to this particular country?
Probably, if you ask me about the most like attracted country in Europe, I would say that this is France, because well, I was found of France during all my childhood because I love history a lot, and you know, I read a lot about France. And when I finally got there, I was so amazed by the architecture, by the style, and I was learning French for 2 years by the time when I got to France. So this was something very personal for me. And then I went there for working in a campus. This was a kind of summer internship for me. And then I attended to the master degree in one of the French universities. So that's why France for me is a very beloved country.
You mentioned that Ukrainians finally have the opportunity to actually move in a Western direction rather than the Eastern one. So how do Ukrainians perceive Europe? And now I'm referring a bit to the European Union, of course, but how do they perceive this European idea?
Well, the perception of Europe in Ukraine is quite high and positive, and it's growing from year to year. Even though you know that in Europe and in the rest of the world we have big problems regarding the politics, the economic situation, and stuff like that. But in Europe, I think that 2013. The revolution of dignity that happened in 2013 was a key point for Ukraine because the majority of people, they already felt that Europe is the right direction. But unfortunately, our government wasn't so sure about that. And there were plenty of reasons why. The confusion about the perception of the European, of the revolution of dignity in Europe may be that like a lot of Europeans, they were thinking that Ukrainians are fighting so hard for joining the European Union, actually. But the thing is that this wasn't the number one desire for Ukraine. The desire was to finally start building the European country within the Ukraine, to get rid of the corruption, to have the government that would respect the laws and the human dignity. And we got sick of the problems we had inside, and that never changed. So this was our first desire. We were moving closer to West because, of course, the European values and European way of thinking was, for us, was more positive and could bring us more law and order in our country, and we felt this support. So that's why, of course, we didn't want to leave like other countries of the former USSR anymore. So that's why we really began this process of transformation, and that's why we also got stuck with the reaction of the Russian Federation, because they don't want to lose Ukraine as a former USSR republic and a neighbor country, and that they estimate Ukraine as as a brother or a sister, something like that. That they never would admit Ukraine going like sharing the Western values, first of all, not even going to the European Union, because we never know if this will ever happen. That a lot of other countries are still waiting. That's not the reason. The reason is to transform our country from the inside, and they are scared about that, because this is a very big challenge for the Russian regime if Ukraine will turn out to be successful.
They still feel sort of a historical ownership over the Ukraine, right? Because Ukraine was
Correct.
a very long time of your history. Ukraine was part of the Russian Federation, Kiev, Russia, Russian Empire, USSR, and all of these state entities. So it's very interesting explanation for the perception of the Ukrainians, or how the Europe is perceived in the East, because this is also something that should be really said out loud. Because, for example, the perception of Ukrainians that is present in Czech, in Slovak, in Poland, in whatever, is always based on the experiences with the people that you get to know, right? And usually those are labor workers, right? In most of the cases. And this is where, for example, in Czech Republic, and I'm not saying there is a sort of an anti bias against the Ukrainians, but they are perceived as cheap labor, cheap workforce for doing things that Czechs wouldn't do. And this is very interesting to see the perception on the other way around, right? What is the perception of Ukrainians in Ukraine that stay there for whatever reasons, and how they see Europe?
I understand that, of course, a lot of Ukrainians, they still are going abroad, and this is happening because they are struggling in Ukraine. Some people that just do not want to struggle, do not want to fight, so they are looking for better life abroad. But you know that, if Ukraine succeed in their way to transform into democratic country, and of course will grow their welfare, I think that, of course, immigration will be limited and will stop, just because the Ukrainians will have more opportunities to be employed here and to live their successful life here. We actually is the, let's say, the country that still separates European countries from the from the Russian Federation, and we have the borders with Europe, and we have the borders with Russia, and we are like a transfer country. Everything is happening here. And that's why actually the discourse about Ukraine, I think that it went to the all European level. For us, the Europe is somehow the lighthouse. So the European countries, the Western democracies, they give us the example of what how the successful society might look like, and how the government needs to be built, and what would be the division of the power in between the government and the parliament. How this really needs to work. That's why we take a lot of we try to learn a lot from the European democracies. And I know that from the inside of the Europe, there are a lot of problems with the governance of the countries of the European Union, as of the common institutions of the European Union.
It's very interesting what you've just said, because it's in terms of the Europe as the lighthouse for Ukraine, to show the example of how the good democracy works. That's very interesting, because you have more than well, now we have 26 members, as far as if I remember good, 26 members of the EU, and every one of them, there are some similarities in how the system works, right? It's a parliamentary democracy, it's a monarchist parliamentary democracy. And there are different levels of the democracy. And this is very interesting thing, right? Because Europe and European institution works as sort of a scale for balancing this extremism, liberalism. And it's so interesting, because then the Ukrainians, they can actually see what works and what doesn't. And then from there, they can pick what they really want to implement in their own environment. So this is also very interesting what you have said in the case of the lighthouse. What is the one thing that you like about Europe? One thing, and then what is the one thing that you don't really like about the Europe?
Actually, what comes to my mind when I think about the Europe is the diversity, because I saw that plenty of times already. I saw how diverse Europe is, and still it's a unique landscape in terms of the values and the way that how people really probably perceive their lives and their societies. What I would say about the bad things is that probably I don't really like that European Union lacks integrity, and it goes it goes at the same time with diversity. On one hand you have diversity, and it's cool, because when it's so many different things you can see and learn and meet in European continent. On the other hand, you don't have the integrity between them, and the integrity is what really creates the misunderstanding sometimes, and that's a tough thing, of course, to do, to create the common understanding. I think that Europe lacks the storytelling, because some people they simply don't understand why they need to live together and why they need to learn from each other. But this is actually their reality, because all this continent is packed by countries, as you said, like 26 countries. Well, I even think that there are 27, but like the Croatia joined, the UK left. Anyway, even though they, these are the movements inside of the bloc of countries, still you live together. You can't change the geographical position, and the lack of integrity. This is actually what creates the problems. Some people, they just don't want to hear other people, and even their neighbors. And I think for Europe, when we talk about Europe, this is very important. Sometimes you spend 2 hours on the road and you are in another country already. This is not what you can experience in Asia, for example, simply because like the ties between countries are not so close. And in Europe, they are so close. Even when the friendship and the relatives and the marriages, your families are so mixed.
I made a short note to what you were saying just, and I think if we do understand Europe properly, then we actually understand that one of the things that Europe can teach us is how to respect someone with a different opinion. And because the opinion of people from different countries is shaped by different inputs, right? Because what you see in the, I don't know, let's imagine what you see in the Czech newspapers, it's something completely different what you're going to see in the Polish newspapers. Why? Because discourse. And I mean, of course, we can now say that in Poland nowadays it's going to be even worse because the Polish government bought many of the newspapers through the Orlen oil company, which we're going to see what is going to be outcome. I don't expect anything very positive coming out from this situation when the government is actually owning the local newspapers, even though through a privately owned company. But anyway, what I wanted to say that, in my opinion, what is the good thing about Europe? As you said, it's packed. It absorbs so many different cultures on such a small land. And this is this inter-exchange and this, and you said like for me, I'm half Czech, half Hungarian. I know so many people that are half Hungarian, half something here in the Central Europe. Why? Because this is sort of the leftover of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, right? When the Czech, Austria, Hungary, Southern Slavs, Balkan countries, all of that was part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and this is sort of the leftover from that era, right? And we don't have to really deal with that, but it's the beauty of being European, right? That you are probably mix of at least for 5-6 different cultures, right? And this is the beauty of the being European. And as I said, like to me, one thing that I really like is that it teaches you respect each other for having very different opinion based on your culture, based on your government, based on your experience, based on everything that you experience on your daily life. And one thing, and I'm going to mention one thing that I don't like really about Europe, and that is still the division between West and East. And now I'm going to a little bit elaborate on that. Why West and East? Because Easterners are still perceived in the West in a very non-positive way. Non-positive way, in the same way as Ukrainians might be perceived here in the Central Europe, right? So cheap labor, of course, it's changing, but it's difficult to change someone's mind, right? So what I don't really like is perception of the Eastern Europeans in the West. Why? Because if we want to be really united in diversity, we should try to be really open towards the sort of different opinions of Eastern Europeans that might not always agree with what the Westerners say. Why? Because we Europeans, we were shaped behind the Iron Curtain, right? Like my parents, they lived under communist regime, so they still have this perception of the big brother watching them, surveilling them. And I believe that we really need time to really, I don't want to, and now pardon my French, but we really need time to get our shit together.
So what we learn from the European Union and how really the country can change if it implements the European standards and values, this is all comes actually from the neighbor countries we have, like Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania. We look forward to them because this is our example. I mean, we often say the Czech Republic and Poland, this is like Ukraine in the future, probably like in 20-30 years, because like you also were a part of the Soviet bloc and you transformed and you really moved forward a lot. You have lots of achievements, and the only thing we can do here is just to follow your example, because we were never a part of the European Union as the whole block of countries. We can also learn from your experience, and that's it. So basically, right, we need to educate people. People they just don't know what to believe. If they lack the communication, they start thinking irrational, and they sometimes pick up the populist narrative and that's how they really destroy their unity and their beliefs, because they are just misled by the politicians who just want to gain the popularity, of course, and to be elected.
Because it's very easy to accept this kind of populistic ideas, because it's usually one of the easiest and the short-term type of solutions, right? Well, do you think that European Union is important for the life of common Europeans? And well, Ukraine is not the member, obviously, of the European Union, but to some extent, it might be also very important for you. So imagine common European, and do you think that there is a importance in her or his life of European Union?
Mm-hmm. I think that European Union is very important, even in terms of the economy, because it makes the life of the Europeans much easier. And the freedom of movement of the goods, the capitals, and the people is a big achievement.
Do you think that it's possible to have two identities? And now I'm talking about your national one and then the European identity. And how does this notion of having multiple identities manifest itself in the life of the common European?
Well, I think we all have really two identities already. Me, I have, my Ukrainian and European. Some people in Ukraine, of course, they don't have European identity. Well, unfortunately, they even don't have Ukrainian identity. That's the whole problem, because they feel themselves as a rather USSR citizen or the Russian, like the Russian as their own the first nationality. Anyway, European identity is something that was created, in my understanding, during the last 50 years only, and these are the values, first of all, and the communication between the countries. If you can have your own cultural code, because we are all from different parts of the Europe, and we are the Eastern Europe, and the Western Europe is very, very different. And but the main thing is to share the same values.
The European identity in your sort of worldview is shared values, beliefs, and understanding, while engaging and creating the common future. With other Europeans as well.
Yes.
Accompanied with the empathy, compassion, and understanding and respect, all of that what comes with actually coming in touch on daily basis with different opinions of people from different countries. Where do I see Europe based on the current situation that we are seeing right now happening in the Central Europe, Western Balkans, and Eastern Europe, and especially Eastern Partnership countries? Well, we can see what is happening between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which are both members of the Eastern European Partnership, and what was the reaction of the European Union, right? We haven't seen a sort of reaction whatsoever, because probably might be like that Europe didn't know how to react on Russia and Turkey, which was, of course, probably a proxy war between these two countries, I guess. The second thing is, what is the reaction of the European Union regarding the Belarus? The same thing. They are concerned, and that's like the whole story ends, right? By being concerned, you're not going to help those people that are actually in need of your help, right? By being concerned, you're just saying that you are not capable of doing anything because you're actually afraid of doing something. You're afraid of the reactions, what might be. Or the states, member states of the Europe, they don't share the same opinion regarding the Belarus, right? For Spain, what is Belarus, right? It's like There is no
They don't know. Yeah, they don't know.
There is
the
no
country.
argument in Spain supporting the opposition in the Belarus, right? So this is something that we should be also working on, right? So where I see where Europe might be in 10 years is more divided than it's now. What is my hope that with hard work of young people like you and many other people, we're going to see a better future. We're going to see more united Europe. We're going to see more diverse Europe. We're going to see bright people building and innovating the processes that we are implementing or we have right now in the Europe, in public world, in NGO, in whatever. This is my hope for the future of Europe. But this is something that is not going to come without any price of very radical change in the mindset of common Europeans, right? And this is something that I really like what Brian Whitmore said during our session. He said that we are basically in the crisis of identity. We don't follow the story that has been built throughout the centuries, right? The story of, in the case of the Europe, the story of fight for your own rights, fight for your liberty, right? In France, in any other countries, mostly. Well, France is France is sort of the biggest example of fighting for democracy and freedom, right? So this is something that we have sort of lost touch with because we don't learn, we don't study our history, and this is the most beautiful thing that we can actually take inspiration from and build better future for Europe. So this is my hope for Europe as such, that we come together in order to build strong lighthouse, as you have just said in first part, lighthouse for other countries that are not yet members of the European Union, that they can take the example of and build a better future for their own citizens. But this is something that we really have to work hard on. And I hope that there is more people like you that they do really pay attention to what is happening around them, and they are willing to spend their time on actually building this strong grassroots that we need in order to build better Europe in 5-10 years. What is one thing that, in your opinion, has your country contributed to the European heritage?
I think that Ukraine actually contributed a lot to the European heritage. I'm not saying that this was, the key country or something, but the history of Ukraine, as you also mentioned, was somehow connected with Europe all the time because we were the part of the Austrian Empire, the part of Ukraine. We were the part of Poland as well, and lots of Ukrainians also migrated from Ukraine in 1991, working now in different countries and became members of the European community already. It's also the country which separates Russia from the European countries, and we have the war in Donbass, and we are keeping this border between Europe and Russia, and willing to win. And this is very important, not only for us and for Europe as well, because the borders of Europe is actually moving far to the east, and this means that Europe actually is a successful project. If we talk about the European Union,
we can see European heritage in the long term, but also in the short term, when in 20 years we're going to be talking about the situation when Ukraine was fighting for the Europe on its eastern borders, I would say. And with that, on that note, I would like to thank you, Alex, once again for taking your time to be a guest on my podcast.
I hope that my interview and my example will create more clearness and understanding of where Ukraine is and what Ukrainians really think about Europe.
Thank you, Alex, once again for your great contribution to our podcast and to our discussion, and finding our intention of finding the common European identity.